Welcome back. I'm talking with former Representative Bob Forey, who is talking to us about the Idaho Land Board. This is a board that very few people are really familiar with, but it has to do with endowment funds, and we're talking about billions of dollars. Is that correct, Bob?
Yes. Yeah.
And there are some citizens and legislators who are a little bit concerned, as I hear you speak, that the land board, who is charged with the responsibility of managing lands, and the assets are to benefit public schools and 9 different institutions or endowments. Okay, now you're telling us that they're getting involved with private enterprise. They're kind of going head to head with some private enterprise, and they're also becoming state realtors, if you will.
Correct.
In terms of how they're doing this. You've got a chart here. I don't know if it's helpful. You tell me what you want to do. We'd like to help people understand it, because it's pretty hard to get your brain around all of this, especially when you're talking billions of dollars of money and millions of acres of land, and the schools, and then you're talking private businesses. You were talking about a pub earlier, or to me, about them wanting to invest possibly in what sounds like private enterprise to me.
Well, it would be. It's developing the property in the old Sherm Perry building.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I think, 84% vacant now, and they can't lease it. So they're losing money on that investment. So they came up with the idea of remodeling it and put in a brew pub and restaurant, and then have somebody come along and lease that to operate it. And then they would pay the land board whatever lease they can get out of, however much money. The problem with that is the Constitution says they cannot lease that unless they put it up for auction, so that you or me or any citizen out there could go down to the land board and say, look, I want to bid on operating that brew pub.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to do that, so they want to amend the Constitution to take that auction requirement out.
Okay, all right, I understand that now. So if you or I can't bid on it, the general public can't bid on it, who do they want to run it?
Well,
they want to choose who? They want to pick and choose?
It may come down to that, yes. That's why they want to do away with the auction.
Or do they even want to run it themselves? I mean, what would be the point in not wanting, if they want it, if they're improving something, with keeping in mind that they're improving it so that someone will come along and want to lease it,
mm-hmm.
and yet now they're saying, well, we don't want to lease it to just anybody.
Well,
I don't understand what the point would be.
No, I'm not sure just what their plan is there. All I know, the same with the affordable storage. They have 414 units there, and they bought that and then hired somebody to come along and operate it for them.
Okay, so that goes back to my original question. They've hired somebody, they own the land and the building. Is now that person a public employee?
Well,
or a government employee?
I don't know.
Because if they're saying the only one that can buy this is who we choose, if we put our people in there, then I would agree with you that they're definitely going against the private enterprise, because now we're talking about them putting their own people in there, if that's the case, as they did in this one. It certainly bears clarification as to whether or not this person is a government employee, and if so, are there government benefits attached to that position?
Not at the present time, but I think they would put out a request for proposal and advertise it and have somebody that wanted to run that pub come in. That's what they did, I think, with the affordable storage. Only I understand it's some of the same people that had worked there before that are now running it. And I guess they would be quasi-state employees. They're not paid by the Well, they are. They're paid. I don't know how that arrangement is. You've gotten me stuck on that one. I do know, however, that one of the things they want to do is begin paying some of the benefits to their tenants, and that was in the this new plan on page 25, providing for the support of the pro rata cost of health, life, and safety services benefiting the property and tenants. So it looks to me like if they're going to pay some of the support for health and life and safety services for tenants, then they're getting into the quasi-employee.
Almost sounds like Percy.
And
but, you know, it does. It sounds to me like they're putting their people in by their people, I mean employees that they hire, and then giving them benefits. And this is all being done with government money, but we're talking about they're buying private businesses. Or
Right. And those businesses all come off of the tax rolls. So the guy that owns the storage unit across the freeway has to pay a full bore of taxes.
And compete with a guy that doesn't have to pay taxes.
That's correct. And that's
and
now,
if they're doing this with storage units, and you know, what's to say they can't do it with a furniture store or with a grocery store?
Yes.
Or with, right now we have state-run liquor stores, but privately we can't compete with those because it is run strictly by the state. It sounds a little bit scary, like we're heading toward state-run businesses.
well, it's called socialism, and that isn't my term. That's a term that the Idaho Supreme Court used. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting. In I was doing some research on this, and our Idaho Supreme Court in the village of Moyer Springs versus Aurora Manufacturing in 1960. If the state favored industries were successfully managed, private enterprise would of necessity be forced out, and the state, through its municipalities, would increasingly become involved in promoting, sponsoring, regulating, and controlling private business, and our free enterprise economy would be replaced by socialism. That's our Idaho Supreme Court. And plainly, that's what's happening. The state-run businesses are competing with private industry.
Okay, so if the Supreme Court says that's not allowed, how is it being allowed?
Well, nobody's taken action to do anything about it.
But now you are working with a group of private citizens and legislators from both parties who are considering legislation. Are we considering a constitutional amendment? Are we considering changing the code? What are we looking at?
Changing the code. And what we're trying to do is instead of allowing the land board to collect money over a 5-year period so they can get enough to make a major commercial purchase, to limit that down, we really would like to have it go into the endowment fund to be distributed out to the schools forthwith. That was our first language. We had that bill last year, and the committee wouldn't even let us, they wouldn't even let them vote on that. We came back this year, and now they're talking about amending that down to 1 year. They could keep money in the land bank fund for 1 year, and then it must go into the permanent endowment fund.
And this is legislation that is currently being
That's
considered.
currently, it may be introduced, maybe it was today or next week.
Okay.
It's ready to go.
So how can people, if they're interested in this subject and they want to know that when it's going to come before the legislature so that they might be able to go to a hearing, they can just, actually you can go to fyidaho.com and click on the Idaho State Legislature, and you can get copies of the bills, and you can also see what bills are being considered. And I suppose that's probably the best way, is just to get into the legislative website so that they can see
That's right.
when that is. Well, we've only got 1 minute, so give us it's going to be really brief. I'm going to have to ask you to come back, Bob, because this is a pretty involved subject.
Well, in 1 minute, could I read that all 5 of the land board members are Republicans.
Okay.
Here's 2 things out of the Republican platform. We believe the proper role of government is to provide for the people only those critical functions that cannot be performed by individuals or private organizations.
And I have to stop you there, and I hate this, but please come back so that people can be updated on this subject, Bob.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming, and thank you.